I want to run through a couple of things that we've got to bear in mind when we're talking about where we are. There is a resurgence, I think, in confidence in working class communities, a resurgence in trade union confidence and power, but that's against a backdrop of some very important things that have been happening to us as working class people in Britain and in Ireland and in Europe and around the world for a number of years. And it was mentioned, I think, by Heather from the Durham Miners Gala, how things changed when Thatcher came in. It wasn't just a change in Britain with the arrival of Thatcher, it was a change in the world economy. It was a shift to a new consensus in political economy. And the consequences of that shift to neoliberalism is what we're facing now. And what we've seen is wages plummeting for working class people all of my life. And I heard one of the contributors talking about the share of what's produced and sold in the market, the share of it that goes in profits and the share of it that goes in wages. And that has absolutely reversed dramatically over that period. There was a recent study done by the Bank of International Settlements into the question of, is there a danger in Western economies from a wage price spiral? And what that showed was unit prices, the costs of products that are sold in the marketplace. At one point, around about half of a unit price cost went in the form of wages, and about 15 to 20% went in the form of profits, and the rest went on materials and energy prices and everything else. That has completely changed. Labour, the spend on wages now is around about 11%. The share that's going to profits is around about 60%, and that's across Western economies. And what that study showed is that the wage influence in the economy is a deflationary pressure. And you've seen that in pay rises that are going around. I don't know if you use the CPI, the measure that was brought in to standardise inflation measures across Europe in this country. We use in the RMT RPI because CPI misses out a very important piece of the puzzle, which is housing costs. And every now and again an employer says, oh, we think we might use CPI this year, and we say, well, you can use it all you like. Our members tend to live in houses and have got rent and mortgages to pay, so we'll use that, thank you very much, as a measure of inflation. So we've seen wages plummet, spending power of working class people, and that's been subsidised by taxpayers through the benefit system, and not just low pay. Those subsidies are a direct handover to the employers, in my opinion. We're not subsidising poverty wages, we're subsidising the profits of the employers out there that are paying those wages. That is what that is for. And we're also subsidising landlords, workers who can't afford to pay their rent, we're topping them up with housing benefit. Workers who can't afford to live, we're topping up their wages to allow their employers to take more and more in the form of profits. And now we're seeing a case in Britain where there are more food banks than there are McDonald's restaurants, where we've got nurses and teachers, the most important people in our economy, the people that look after us when we're sick and tend to our children, go into food banks. And some of my friends in the CWU have told me of food banks in workplaces where their members work and their members queuing up to use them. That's the situation we're in with wages. And industry has changed dramatically. The major manufacturing works that sustain the trade union movements have been completely destroyed, offshored, and are gone. We talk about the state and how it attacks trade union movement. When we had this shift to neoliberal economics, Thatcher in Britain, Reagan in America, and others recognised, in order to make that stick, they had to crush organised labour. And how did they do it in Britain? They shut the industry down in which the strongest section of our movement was employed. It was a deliberate plan to shut down the coal industry in Britain, not because they found a better way of doing it. We import coal now, but because they wanted to break the resistance of the working class to these policies. And those policies were about privatisation, taking our public services, taking our education, our health, our housing, and all of the other industries, water, gas, electric, taking them off of us, things that we used to own collectively, and putting them in the hands of the market and in the pockets of the rich for these people to make huge profits out of. And that's had a consequence, a further weakening of the trade union movement, a further weakening of working class people as a whole. And we've seen a shift in the trade union movement as a result. And I can't help but just say what I think here. So if I annoy anyone with what I'm about to say, that's tough. I'll buy you a pint later. It's led the trade union movement down a blind alley of social partnership, of seeking to make compromises with people who've got no interest in compromising with us as a class. It didn't just happen in Ireland. You're not unique. It happened in Britain, in parts of our movement. It happened in other parts of the world. And it's been no good for us, because I believe fundamentally in this truth. We are permanently in dispute with the people that employ us and the ruling class. There is no such thing as normal industrial trade unions, trade union relations. There is no such thing as normal business industrial relations. Sometimes we're in open dispute when we're stood on picket lines, and sometimes we're in a war of organisation when we're not. Sometimes we're in a battle of ideas over propaganda in the workplace. But we are never out of dispute. It is a battle that goes on, and it can only be won when we take these industries and we take the power away from the people who have got them at the present time. And I think we've got further problems. Now, we've had the problem of changes in technology that have lived with us forever in the trade union movement and in the working class movement. Right back to General Ned Ludd and the Army of Redressers and the power loom. Now we're facing a technological change in digital technology, in artificial intelligence and driverless technology and all the rest of it. That is going to absolutely radically change the way we work. Something like 8 out of 10 jobs will be affected by it. Something like 300 billion jobs globally will be eradicated by it, potentially. Now, back in the day, the idea was you get the big cross-pane hammer and you go down and you smash the loom to pieces. Well, we know that doesn't work. You can't turn the clock back. What we've got to do is take ownership of these things, in common ownership. That is the way forward. But as a movement, the trade union movement in Britain, I have to tell you, we're small. We're in the public sector in the main. We're not as strong as we need to be in the private sector. And we've got a situation now where people don't go out and strike for 11 months. People have got mortgages up to the eyeballs because we sold off the council housing and forced people into the casino and the marketplace in order to find a place to live. So you can't take people out in 11-month strike action and expect them to sustain it. But what you can do is build. And what we haven't got is political power at this present point in time. Now, I've got to tell you, there's a lot of people that are waiting for politicians to ride in on a white horse and are going to save us in our respective parliaments. That's not coming, not anytime soon. And I'll tell you the reason it's not is because our industrial power is not yet strong enough. So what we've got to do is the long work. We've got to rebuild our trade union movement industrially from the ground up. And in Britain, what we've seen over the past period, as a result of those conditions that I've just pointed out, and as a result of the rising inflation, we've had the shock to supply chains from Brexit, we've had the shock to international conflict, to energy prices. That's driven inflation way out of control, and as a result, you've seen people coming out of a pandemic who've had their pay and living standards frozen for years, one after the other. So that gave us a shock. And it was our view in the RMT, the only way we're going to take this on is through strike action. We can't make appeals to politicians. We can't make appeals to public sentiment just on its own. What we had to do was organise and mobilise our own people and take them out into an industrial dispute. And it was our view that we had to try and keep that going for as long as we could, because we knew in that march we were the first out of the traps. We knew Lots of other trade unions were preparing and getting ready and thinking about and warming up to take strike action. But we couldn't wait. Our members wouldn't let us wait anyway. So we had to get going. So we tried to keep this dispute going for as long as we could and try not to burn our people out in the intervening period. And during that time, we made a conscious effort. When we're making the argument for our members, we made the argument for the working class. We didn't say the railway workers deserve this. We said workers deserve it. We didn't let them pitch nurses against teachers. We didn't let them pitch us against the postal workers. We told anyone that was prepared to listen, we'll stand with you if you're prepared to fight. And we'll work together to try and bring political pressure on these people to force a change. But we're up against a ruthless government. The employers that we're in dispute with are indemnified with taxpayers' money. They do not lose a single penny any day that we take strike action, but our members do. They've got the political cover of the government in Parliament, and they've got the support of the entire country's media, all railed against us, and the politicians across the piece in the main, silent, acquiescent, or supporting it, with a few shining examples of people that were prepared to stand up and do the right thing. So we had to organise as best we could with friends in the movement, with Enough is Enough. We had to try new things because we recognise the shape of our trade union movement needs to change. We need to become relevant in the modern world. We've got an Edwardian system and a way of talking to each other through circulars and, by the way, in accordance with circular number 4992, all the rest of it. But we live in a world where everyone's on social media. Instant communications is what they need. And on top of that, all of these conversations we're having with each other as a movement, they're happening in the public realm now. They're not happening in the branch room, in the discipline of the workers' meeting with a chairman who says, stop that, you're going too far, don't denigrate your comrades and brothers and sisters. We're having these conversations in the public, and that can sometimes give ammunition to our enemies. So I think the prospects for us going forward are these. We've got to recognise that these are tough times. We've got to recognise the strengths and weaknesses that we've got, and we've got to appreciate a couple of very important things. If we give people something to get out of bed for, they'll do it. So we've got to be bold, and we've got to state the case clearly for what we want. And in my view, that has got to be on the question of who owns what. It is that simple. Either you can have a housing system that provides homes for families, or you can have an investment opportunity for housing speculators. But you can't have both. Either you can have an education system that takes care of our kids and gives them education and brings them into the arts and science and industry, or you can have an investment opportunity for insurance companies. But you can't have both. And the same goes for energy. Either we can provide the energy that people need to keep them warm in winter and to look after them, or we can have a system where multinational corporations take us and all of our friends and families for an absolute ride. But you can't have both. So that has got to be the banner to which we rally workers. We've got to tell people these things can be better. We don't have to put up with it. There's no reason why anyone in the economies that we live in should be going to a food bank. There's no reason why kids should be going hungry. There's no reason why any old people should be cold in the winter. And we can change that through our own action without relying on anyone else. Independent, working class organisation. And if we build it right, then that will give us a stronger foundation to then start pushing politically. Because without the foundation of industrial organisation in the working class, we're simply begging at the political table. So we've got to build that, and that's long work. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen for a while. But we've got to start it, and we've got to recognise that we need some new forms of doing things. So those are my opinions anyway. I hope not upset too many people. But that's where I think we are. And I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm very pleased to tell you all about that. Cheers.